welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. US President Donald Trump has said that Ukraine should make a deal to end the war with Russia because Russia is a very big power. After meeting President Vladimir Putin in Alaska, President Trump told President Volodymyr Zelensky that Putin offered to freeze the front lines if Kyiv ceded all of Donetsk, a key Russian target. European leaders, including leaders from Germany, France, UK, Italy, and Ursula von der Leyen, will accompany President Volodymyr Zelensky to Washington on Monday for talks with President Donald Trump. The summit comes after President Trump's Alaska meeting with President Putin, who is demanding swaths of Ukrainian territory in a peace deal. Russia said its forces destroyed 300 Ukrainian drones and struck storage sites for Ukraine's Sapsan missiles using warplanes, drones, and missiles, according to the local defense ministry. Moscow claimed improved positions near Zoloty Kolodias in Donetsk, while pro-Ukrainian maps indicated Kyiv's troops had contained the advance. Hamas has rejected Israel's plan to relocate Gaza City residents, calling it a new wave of genocide and displacement for hundreds of thousands, according to statements released today. The Israeli military has said it is deploying tents and shelter equipment to move civilians from combat zones to the south of the enclave. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned that ending the war now would lead to a repeat of the October 7 attacks and an endless conflict, while nationwide strikes and protests erupted in Israel today as families of hostages demanded the government pursue a deal with Hamas instead of escalating the Gaza campaign. This comes as US President Donald Trump has said that Ukraine should make a deal to end the war with Russia because Russia is a very big power. This comes as a meeting of Ukrainian allies, the Coalition of the Willing, set to take place later today. 3 people were killed and 8 others were injured in a shooting at the Taste of the City lounge in Brooklyn's Crown Heights, Manhattan, New York. According to local police commissioner, multiple shooters were involved, with no arrest made yet as police continue their investigation. Air Canada has announced it will resume flights today after the Canadian Industrial Relations Board Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu's directive ordered at the end of a strike that suspended over 700 flights. The CIRB has instructed Air Canada flight attendants to return to work by 2 p.m. local time. Now we have a breaking news right ahead of the crucial talks between United States President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. President Trump has posted on his Truth Social a rather cryptic post saying big progress on Russia, stay tuned. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Gilbert Doctorow. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Brussels. And we have another guest joining us today, David K. Johnston. He's an American author, joins us live from New York. Thank you both for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, Gilbert, I would like to start with you. This is, of course, a cryptic post. What do you think, what can we make of this post by President Trump?
Well, I can't really say. As you said, it's cryptic, and that says it all. It is very interesting, of course, that the Americans have accepted that Zelensky will not come by himself, but will be accompanied by the leading members of the Coalition of the Willing tomorrow in a meeting in Washington. Very good. I think that is excellent because now they can all have it out together. They can discuss precisely how it fits together because Mr. Trump has made it clear that he sides with positions taken by Vladimir Putin, in how to end this war. And that is resisted fiercely by the Europeans and by Mr. Zelensky, who really do not want to end the war at all, because they're all heavily invested in the war, and their hold on power in their respective countries largely depends on the war continuing and their commitment to it appearing to be justified to their populations. So it will be a very interesting meeting, and I expect it to be decisive in ending the war.
Thank you, Gilbert, for sharing that. Well, what is your take, David, on this post? What do you think we can make out of this post by President Trump?
I have a very, very different view of this. I think it's very clear that Donald, in his meeting with Putin, where he applauded this accused war criminal and criminal invader of Ukraine as he came down the red carpet and gave him the photo op opportunity of riding in the presidential limousine, basically has sold out Ukraine. In fact, Marco Rubio, the American Secretary of State, said just hours ago that Donald Trump's position has not changed. And Donald Trump's position has been that the Ukrainians will have to submit to the aggressor because, first of all, Donald has said Ukraine started the war, which is ridiculous, but he has mouthed consistently Kremlin talking points throughout this. And the European leaders who are going to come to Washington have a very clear concern. Putin, in his statements going back more than 25 years, has made it clear that he wants to conquer other free countries that used to be under the boot of the Kremlin. I've spoken with political leaders and some family members who live behind what used to be the Iron Curtain, and there's virtual unanimity that unless Putin is stopped in Ukraine, it's just a matter of time. It could be years, but just a matter of time before Russian tanks roll in and squash their freedom. And Donald doesn't believe in liberty, and the Republican Party in America, which always stood up to the Kremlin, and in which President John F. Kennedy said, "We will bear any burden to support liberty," they don't believe in that anymore. They believe in might makes right. And so I think this is a very, very troubling development. And what you're going to see very, very soon is Donald Trump arguing, well, Ukraine, too bad. You know, you just have to give up your territory and you have to give up the 20,000 kidnapped children because Donald thinks it's in his political advantage to do this.
Thank you very much, Gilbert Doctorow and David K. Johnston, for both sharing your insight. Please, both of you, stay with us as we come back to you and now we stay on the topic. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen hosted Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Brussels today, just a day before his high-stakes talks in Washington tomorrow. Von der Leyen has said that peace in Ukraine must be achieved through strength and security guarantees, stressing that international borders cannot be changed by force. She underlined that decisions about Ukraine's territory must be taken by Ukraine and Ukraine alone. At the joint press conference, Zelensky said Ukraine urgently needs a ceasefire to address Russia's demands, but emphasized that Kyiv will not be sidelined in any negotiations. He called for EU involvement in binding security guarantees, adding that security must function in practice, like NATO's Article 5. Von der Leyen echoed that sentiment, declaring Ukraine must become a steel porcupine, undigestible for potential invaders. She added that the EU, alongside allies, is prepared to support Ukraine's sovereignty with no restrictions on its armed forces or its right to cooperate with partners. The Brussels meeting comes ahead of Monday's trilateral talks at the White House with President Trump and key European leaders. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russian affairs expert. And thank you, Gilbert Doctorow, for staying with us. Now, do you think that there was a mistrust between towards President Zelensky or President Trump? Why are EU leaders joining both of them? Why can't they let President Zelensky go by himself?
because they don't trust him. They think he's too weak. They're afraid that he'll be trashed by Donald Trump. Well, I think they all will be collectively trashed by Donald Trump, as they deserve to be. To call them supporters of Ukraine is utter, straight out of the world of propaganda. They are destroying Ukraine. They have no interest in Ukraine. They only have interest in retaining power, which they think they can do by perpetuating the war and saying that they are saving democracy. My colleague on your show is a very fine propagandist who has repeated unprovable remarks about Putin's interests and intentions going back 25 years. It really is impossible for us to debate because we live in different worlds. And he has his supposed proofs, which I don't believe for a moment. Mr. Trump understands better who Putin is than my colleague on your show. He understands, as he said very clearly, that Russia is a war machine, and that for Ukraine to stand up to Russia and to persist in massive losses and future losses is to encourage the destruction of the country of Ukraine. Therefore, all of its supposed allies, starting with Frau von der Leyen, are the enemies of the Ukrainian people. Let's make that perfectly clear. There will be nothing left to Ukraine if they are allowed to have their way. And Mr. Zelensky doesn't have to worry. He has a few billion that he has stolen from American funding, so he'll find a place to hide when this is all over.
And now I would like to take, David, your point of view on this. Do you agree with Gilbert Doctorow that why couldn't they, EU leaders, why couldn't they let President Zelensky go by himself to meet President Trump tomorrow?
Well, I think the reason these other leaders are going is not anything about Zelensky being weak. He's proven to be quite a strong leader. It's that they need Trump to understand that the rest of the leaders of Europe do not want to give in to a bully who started an illegal war. There's a treaty that Russia promised to never invade Ukraine if it gave up its nuclear weapons. They are there to support Zelensky. And I think the suggestion by your other guest that these are people trying to stay in power, there are no revolutions coming in Western Europe over the war in Ukraine. But it is eminently clear if you read the public record that Putin has these ambitions. And in any event, Putin is the one who started this war. If you don't believe in liberty and individual freedom, then, let's have dictators run the world, which apparently is okay with your other guest. It's certainly not okay with me. And in addition, by the way, having known Donald Trump intimately, I'm often described in American television as the person who knows him best. Donald doesn't know anything. He is appallingly ignorant. He had to be told what happened on December 7th, 1941, when he was president in his first term. How can you not know that if you're an American? So what's going on here is simply Donald Trump identifies with autocrats and dictators. He wants to be a man with unquestioned authoritarian power. He said in his first term, I have an Article 2 in the American Constitution. I have an Article 2 that says I can do anything I want. It says nothing of the kind. And Donald, because of the nature of his upbringing and who his father and mother were, he looks up to people who are dictators who are not accountable to anyone, Vladimir Putin being one of the key ones. So Trump is about to sell out liberty and freedom for the Ukrainians. And the European leaders who are coming to this meeting are going to try to persuade Trump that that's a mistake. And then they're going to have to decide how much they will step up to support and stand up for liberty and freedom rather than might makes right.
Thank you, both of you, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us now as we stay on this topic. Meanwhile, Germany is reaffirming its commitment to Ukraine ahead of a crucial White House meeting tomorrow. Foreign Minister Johann Wadepool said Berlin would not abandon Kyiv on this difficult path of upcoming negotiations. Let's listen in to his full statement.
Ja, moin, meine sehr verehrten Damen und natürlich blickt die ganze Welt zu Beginn der kommenden Woche nach Washington. Der Bundeskanzler hat sich entschieden, Präsident Zelensky nach Washington zu begleiten. Das zeigt erstens, Deutschland nimmt eine führende, moderierende und zusammenführende Rolle in diesem Konflikt ein. Und zweitens, Deutschland steht fest an der Ukraine. Wir lassen Präsident Zelensky auf diesem schwierigen Weg kommender Verhandlungen nicht alleine, sondern wir verteidigen mit ihm gemeinsam das Völkerrecht. Wir verteidigen die Freiheit der Ukraine und damit Europas. Und drittens, die große Begleitung, die Präsident Zelensky von europäischen Partnern und der Kommissionspräsidentin erfährt, zeigt, Europa ist geschlossen. Und diese Position herbeigeführt zu haben, ist ein großes Verdienst des Bundeskanzlers. Deutschland geht hier bewusst in eine Führungsrolle hinein. Wir wissen, dass wir in entscheidenden Tagen von Verhandlungen sind und werden unser gesamtes außenpolitisches Gewicht dafür zur Verfügung stellen, dass es eine gute Woche für die Ukraine, eine gute Woche für die Freiheit in Europa wird. Herzlichen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit.
Chancellor Friedrich Merz, along with other European leaders, will join President Volodymyr Zelensky in Washington August 18, and their presence is aimed at strengthening Europe's united front as Ukraine prepares for delicate talks with U.S. President Donald Trump. Wade Poole has stressed that the broad support Zelensky is receiving from European partners and the European Commission proves Europe's unity. He added that Germany would bring in all its foreign policy weight to ensure this is a good week for Ukraine and a good week for freedom in Europe. The Washington talks come just days after President Trump's summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on August 15th, which ended without a breakthrough on ending the war in Ukraine. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russian affairs expert, and David K. Johnston. He's an American author. Now I'd like to come to Gilbert, you. So what role do you see that EU playing in securing these guarantees? Don't you think this will backfire as a pressure towards President Trump, as President Trump doesn't like to be, from some analysts, he doesn't not like to be pressured?
Who does? They're coming as a gang, yes, and they're going to probably receive an American gang in return. I can't believe that Mr. Trump is going to stand there and have five or six people all against his policies having free reign, free speech. I think Mr. Merz has to visit his tailors. He has to be fitted for a Nazi costume because he is a worthy successor to Adolf Hitler. He is the most dangerous leader in Germany since World War II. And so he is the appropriate man to lead Europe over the abyss into a war with Russia that will devastate Europe. I hope it begins with devastation of Germany first, because they are the most responsible country in this upcoming conflict with Russia. Mr. Merz is fully deserving of the position as leader of the coalition of the willing. He, unfortunately, is taking the German nation with him. They haven't had enough destruction from Russian tanks and bombs in World War II. They want to go at it again. That is how I see this move against Donald Trump, led by Merz and von der Leyen, who happens also to be from the same political party in Germany as Mr. Merz. The Christian Democrats who run the European People's Party, who run the European Parliament. Germany has been running European institutions since 2008, since the Merkel period. They were very careful to disguise this control of European institutions and to say the decisions on foreign policy and military policy are taken in Brussels. Correct. But all of the European institutions have been directed by Germans. Therefore, the Germans are responsible for the present situation in Europe, facing a potential war with Russia because of their aggressive position on putting soldiers on the ground to ensure Ukrainian sovereignty. No, Mr. Trump understood well. The Ukrainian sovereignty will be ensured by a thorough, well-prepared and researched peace treaty. And that is why he went from the notion of a temporary ceasefire to negotiating a full-bodied peace treaty now. If a full-bodied peace treaty is negotiated, there is no need for forces to be placed on the ground in Ukraine to protect it, because all of the reasons of conflict with Russia will be removed. As for the democratic and liberty-loving virtues of Mr. Trump's opponents, including my debating partner today, I would remind him that the Democratic Party and Mr. Biden and Hillary Clinton were responsible for violating law and for leading a campaign against Mr. Trump through the Russia, the whole Russia hoax of Trump's supposed coming to power thanks to the Russians. The violation of law, the violation of our right has been a democratic property.
Thank you, Gilbert, Dr. Rowe, for sharing that insight. We will come back to David for this discussion after we take Rubio's comments. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says both Ukraine and Russia will have to make concessions if they want to reach a peace deal to end the war. His remarks follow reports that Russian President Vladimir Putin is demanding that Kyiv hand over the eastern Donbas region as a condition for ending Moscow's offensive, a proposal Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has already rejected, insisting no territory will be ceded. Speaking on the face of the nation, Rubio stressed that Washington will continue working to support negotiations, but admitted peace may prove elusive. If peace is not going to be possible here, and this is just going to continue on as a war, people will continue to die by thousands, we may unfortunately wind up there, he warned, adding that Russia could face additional consequences if talks do collapse. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump hailed what he called big progress on Russia following his recent summit with President Vladimir Putin in Alaska. Posting on his Truth Social, Trump wrote, "Big progress on Russia, stay tuned," ahead of his White House meeting with Zelensky on Monday. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Gilbert Dr. Rowe and David K. Johnston. David, I would like to come back to you for would you like to add something on what our guest Gilbert Dr. Rowe's reaction was on if President Trump, from your analysis, President Trump, does he like or appreciate this pressure that's coming in alongside President Zelensky tomorrow as he comes along with coalition for Ukraine?
Well, one of the things I can tell you from knowing Donald for 37 years and having spent many hours with him and negotiated with him, always successfully, because he's not a good negotiator, is that once Donald has an idea in his head, you can't get it out. But I am very troubled that your other guest, Mr. Dr. Rowe, has just given you Russian propaganda rather than facts. So let me make sure people know a few facts. Days after Donald Trump came down the escalator in June of 2015, the Kremlin had an emissary send an email to the Trump campaign saying they were going to help him defeat Hillary Clinton. There was a meeting shortly after that where this was the topic of discussion. And the Trump people lied and denied about this for a year until the New York Times, where I was a reporter for many years, got hold of the emails and made them public. The Mueller report establishes 10 examples of obstruction of justice, and we found out after the report was written that Mueller was specifically prohibited from doing what we thought he was doing, which was investigating the Russian interference. He was limited to investigating efforts to cover up or hide that interference. Vladimir Putin is on videotape saying that of course he helped Donald Trump win and he favored Donald Trump. What you haven't heard in a serious fashion at all from your other guest is that Russia chose to invade Ukraine, that Russia asserts that it is entitled to control Ukraine, that it has kidnapped 20,000 children. Vladimir Putin has an arrest warrant out for him as a accused war criminal. And the idea that one should give in to an aggressor is a complete rejection of any sense of moral decency. It's simply an acceptance of right, that might makes right. So let's be clear, Donald Trump, who has a history that I've documented in my best-selling books and articles going back 40 plus years of receiving unusual benefits and having extraordinary relations with Russians, who's been paid premium prices by Russian criminals for units in his Trump Tower building and elsewhere, whose family has said that we're getting all the financing we need out of Russia. Donald Trump has deep, significant economic ties that influence his actions and his judgment. But he is not in any way acting as the American Constitution or the traditional Republican Party has been, which is to oppose tyrants, however imperfectly. America is certainly not a perfect country by any means.
Yes.
But the U.S. has never sided with the Kremlin.
Yes, we are, unfortunately, David, sorry to interrupt you there, but we are running out of time for this discussion, as we have in other discussions as well. But thank you very much, Gilbert Doctorow and David K. Johnston, for both joining us today and sharing your insight from both corners of the world. Thank you very much. Now we move on. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu criticized the protest organized by the families of the hostages to end Gaza war. His statement comes after huge demonstrations taking place all over Israel demanding ceasefire in support of release of hostages. Protesters have reportedly blocked major roadways, have closed private businesses, and have staged rallies in big cities in Israel. Netanyahu has stated that any call to end the war only strengthens Hamas and delay the release of the hostages. He has also stated that his government wants to ensure horrors of October 7, 2023 not to be repeated again. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his ministers, and the coalition partners in government has long criticized the protests to stop the war. Let's listen into what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had to say.
אלה שקוראים היום לסיום המלחמה ללא הכרעת החמאס, לא רק שמקשיחים את עמדת החמאס ומרחיקים את שחרור חטופינו, הם גם מבטיחים שזוועות ה7 באוקטובר יחזרו על עצמם שוב ושוב, ושבנינו ובנותינו יצטרכו להילחם שוב ושוב במלחמת אין קץ. לכן, גם כדי לקדם את שחרור חטופינו, וגם כדי להבטיח שעזה לא תהווה יותר איום על ישראל, עלינו להשלים את המלאכה ולהכריע את החמאס.
Now for this discussion, we are joined by Professor Ephraim Inbar. He's a senior researcher at JISS, joins us live from Jerusalem. Thank you, Professor, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, given this worsening situation of humanitarian crisis in Gaza, what is happening and how is this this news covered in Israeli media around you about the crisis and also about the growing voice for opposition and the families' voices growing in Tel Aviv?
I think Israel is quite divided on this issue, and the media is almost fully mobilized by the quarters that want basically to see the Netanyahu government fall, and they put pressure on Netanyahu by using this issue. I must say that this is demand to end the war in order to get back the hostages is very unusual. I don't know of any state that has stopped the war because it had prisoners of war on the other side. Also, this demand ignores the recommendations of several committees that were established by Israeli government to regulate the issue of hostages, basically recommending that we should not give in to the terrorist demands. And I think that the fate of the country is obviously more important than the fate of individuals. Nevertheless, this position of mine, and some people, particularly on the right, is not fully accepted by the Israeli people. And but the government should make the decisions, and leaders make decisions not always according to the will of the people, but what they think it's right. I think that Netanyahu wants to end the war on his terms, and his terms are quite reasonable. First of all, the militarization of Gaza, the expulsion of Hamas from Gaza, a goal that is shared by the international community, and bringing in some kind of civilian rule that that is dedicated to fight terrorism. Israel doesn't want to have on its border again a terrorist organization that's caused so much damage to Israel.
Thank you very much, Professor Ephraim Inbar, for joining us and sharing your insight from Jerusalem. Thank you very much. Now we stay on this region, and an Israeli airstrike has hit Al-Ahli Hospital in Gaza City. The strikes have killed at least 7 people. The attack comes as Israeli forces advance plans to relocate more than 1 million Palestinians from northern Gaza to designated zones in the south, drawing international concerns over worsening humanitarian conditions. The Israeli military has described the relocation effort as a necessary measure to protect civilians amid ongoing combat operations. However, aid groups and rights organizations warn that the southern zones, often referred to by observers as concentration areas, are overcrowded, under-resourced, and remain vulnerable to bombardment. This is all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.